What does the U.S. and its allies do if this referendum goes forward in the coming days and the people in Crimea vote to secede, in effect, from Ukraine and become part of Russia?
Well, we have made clear today, as have many countries around the world, that this referendum would be illegal under the terms of the Ukrainian constitution, illegal under international law. Any such referendum would have to occur under the Ukrainian constitution across the entirety of Ukraine and not just in a sub-region like this. So this is a referendum that, if it went forward, would get almost no recognition, except perhaps from Russia, that seems to be behind it.
So if this referendum goes forward and they vote and they move to become part of Russia, what does the U.S. do then?
Well, I think you heard President Obama today issue and sign this executive order in which we threaten sanctions against those who would interfere with the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine. There were no names on the list today, but those names would come, I think, as soon as you saw people interfering along the lines of what's been described or proposed in Crimea. We are hopeful, Wolf, that the political and economic isolation that Russia faces, not just on the behest of the United States, but in the broader international community, and particularly with Europe standing with us, that with that pathway ahead looking unattractive, to say the least, that President Putin can become part of the solution here and pull back his forces from Crimea, engage with the Crimeans in a way that doesn't incite them to make announcements like the kind they made today, but in fact encourage them to engage with the Ukrainian authorities, who are eager to do so. But so far we have not seen signs that he's prepared to take the de-escalatory ramp that is available to him.
Putin probably says, you know what, the world forgot about Georgia, they'll forget about Crimea, I got to do what I want to do, and I'm going forward with it. They can have some modest sanctions, if you will, they can scream, they can shout, but they'll forget about it sooner rather than later, just as they did with Georgia.
The international community would not forget the kind of isolation that Russia would face in the event of the kinds of maneuvers that appear that have been carried out in Crimea and that appear to have been contemplated in eastern Ukraine. These are maneuvers that would leave Russia severely isolated on the international scene. And as we saw, it feels like a million years ago, but as we saw just a couple weeks ago in Sochi, there's a different model that Putin has pursued. He wants Russia to be on the international stage. He wants it to be flexing its muscles. This is not something that's going to happen again if he takes Russia down this path of isolation, and a very perilous path that could cost lives in Ukraine.
If you've severed military to military, real dialogue with Russia in these areas involving a sensitive issue like Iran's nuclear program, Syria's chemical weapons, doesn't that undermine all the efforts that you've been so engaged in over these past several months at the United Nations?
Russia will pursue its interests, and Russia has stood with us as part of the P5+1 in seeking to ensure that Iran does not obtain a nuclear weapon. Russia, on the specific issue of chemical weapons, of course, we've had bigger challenges on the other Syria fronts, on the humanitarian and the political front, but on the specific issue of chemical weapons, Russia seems to still want Syria to do away with its chemical weapons program. We've seen no evidence that they're pulling back from the kind of engagement with the Syrian regime that we had seen prior to the Ukraine crisis. But again, Wolf, we've got to take each issue separately. We are pursuing our interests. We see an interest in the Ukrainian context, not only in standing with the Ukrainian people at this incredibly difficult time, but also standing up for the rules of the road in the international order. It would be immensely destabilizing if any sub-region anywhere could just call a referendum with no regard for the view of the broader population, no regard for the view of the legitimate authorities, and simply decide to join a neighboring country.